What's up guys, it's Eric from Arcane and welcome back to another Forbidden Light deck profile, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new Zygarde GX. This is actually going to be the same list that we did feature in our recent testing rounds video, so if you actually want to see how this deck looks in action, I will have a link to that video below in the description. And of course guys, also if you are new here to this channel and you're not familiar with those testing rounds videos that we post, they're typically featuring some unrefined, rough starting points to begin testing from. So that means there might be a few things in this list that could potentially be tweaked or improved upon. So just something to keep in mind as we do go through this deck profile. So like I said, this is going to be Zygarde GX, one of the main mascots of the Forbidden Light set. So let's take a look at it and see what it's all about. So of course we are playing 3 Zygarde GX. That is going to be our main attacker. It's a basic Pokemon of course, but it has 200 hit points, which is crazy. Especially when you look at some of the other Stage 1 GXs that we have in the game, like Lycanroc as an example, which has 200 hit points as well. So Zygarde, just a huge tanky Pokemon. Now of course it is weak to grass, so that means things like Tapu Bulu and Gliscod are going to give it a little bit of trouble. But most other things are going to have to probably two-shot this guy, which is definitely going to be good for us. 3 retreat as well, which is also kind of expected for a Zygarde. But as far as its attacks, its first attack for a double colorless energy is 50 damage, and you attach 2 fighting energy from your discard pile to your active Zygarde GX. So it's kind of nice. You have a way to power yourself up just for one attachment with a DCE. You can start swinging for some damage and get some more energy on the field. And then conveniently, its next 2 attacks both take a double colorless energy and 2 fighting energy. So that means if you get 2 fighting energy in the discard pile, after one of these first attacks, you're powered up and ready to use the rest of your moves. So its next attack, just for 2 fighting and a DCE, does kind of a vanilla 130. You're just going to two-shot everything. You know, the attack cost is a little bit steep, I guess, but, you know, once you factor in things like max elixirs and the first attack, it's really not that hard to get going. But really the star of the show is going to be Zygarde's GX move. So yet again, for the same attack cost, you do 150 damage, and then on your opponent's next turn, you prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to Zygarde GX by your opponent's Pokemon EX and GX. So you're basically immune from everything relevant in the current format. Now, of course, certain things will be able to still do damage to you, like the Baby Hoopa, just as an example, or maybe a Greninja deck or something like that. But luckily for Zygarde, most of the big decks, at the time of filming, of course, are going to be GX heavy. So most of the time, you are going to be immune from attacks on your opponent's next turn. And one thing that's important to note too is Zygarde is a fighting Pokemon, which means it gains a ton of support, which we're going to start going over shortly as well. So we have all sorts of extra ways to increase his damage output. But really the star of the show is going to be the first attack and the GX move. But let's talk about some of the damage modifiers that we're running. So the first one is going to be the new Diancie Prism Star. It's a new card that is coming out of Forbidden Light. So it has this ability, as long as Diancie is on your bench, your fighting Pokemon do 20 more damage to your opponent's active, which is pretty nice. It's kind of like a Regirock EX, but it only gives up 1 prize, and it's a little bit better actually. So let's just do the math. You know, if we have, for example, on Zygarde's first attack, the 20 extra damage is going to be 70, which is actually really nice because you knock out every basic in the current format, you know, outside of GXs and EXs and things like that, of course. But you know what I mean. The evolving basics that we typically see only have 60 to 70 hit points. So the fact that you can hit for 70 is actually big because you can also knock out things like Wimpods, Trubbishes, Riolus. So really nice that Diancie is going to bump up that damage a little bit. It hits some important numbers. Similarly, if we look at the GX attack, 150 base damage, 170 with Diancie, that means you can take knockouts on Tapu Leles, which is also really nice. Also, once you factor in things like Choice Band, you can further increase that damage output even more. And also, if we just look at the vanilla regular attack on Zygarde for 130, with Diancie Prism Star, you're going to do 150, and then with the Choice Band, you're going to do 180. Similarly, knocking out things like Tapu Leles and other basic GXs and EXs in the game. So Diancie Prism Star really helps with the numbers as far as taking certain knockouts in the game. We are also still playing one of the old Regirock EX as well. It has a similar ability, that Regipower ability. Your fighting Pokemon's attacks are going to do 10 more damage, excluding Regirock EX, to your opponent's active Pokemon. So that might not seem like a big deal. It's like, do you really need Regirock when you have Diancie? And I think there are certain situations where Regirock is actually pretty good. So think of some of the 210 hit point Pokemon in the current format outside of Zoroark GX, since we already hit that for weakness. But most of the stage ones in the current format have around 210 hit points. The evolutions, I think, have 200. But generally speaking, I think 200 210 is going to be a good number to hit for. So especially against things like Zygarde GX, being able to hit for 210 is going to be really, really nice. So we have 2 outs to increasing our damage output a little bit more. So that's pretty nice, especially if we prize Dancy Prism Star with a Regirock and Choice Band. We can actually take knockouts on Layways with Zygarde's first attack, or I guess first main attack that does a significant amount of damage. So both these cards just really help with the damage output of Zygarde as far as hitting certain numbers in the deck. Next up, though, we're playing another new card from Forbidden Light. It's going to be the Baby Buzzwole. So Baby Buzzwole here, its first attack is really the one we're looking at for just a single fighting energy. If your opponent has 4 prizes remaining, this attack is 30 plus 90 more. So that's really nice. If you have just a single fighting energy, you're hitting for 120. But then if you have something like Diancie Prism Star in play, it's going to be 140. With a Choice Band, that's 170. With a Regirock, that's 180. So even though this is just a, a kind of situational attack, it's, I don't think, to be underestimated, just because you can sometimes get some important knockouts with this card against certain Pokemon in the format. Now, Buzzwole does have another attack. It's not too relevant, but like I said, we're mainly looking at this first attack. It's just a nice little non-GX Pokemon that we can kind of force our opponent into a 7 prize game by attacking with it. So pretty nice card. I do like it. Also, just for a single fighting energy, even if your opponent has not taken any prizes yet, sometimes you can maybe take a knockout on your opponent's Zoruas, just as an example. So definitely a card I've been liking a lot in this list so far. Next up, we are playing a 2/2 Octillery line. So kind of similar to Buzzwole decks of the past. This deck definitely has a kind of similar engine here. So we're playing Octillery for its Abyssal Hand ability. Once during your turn, you may draw until you have 5 cards in your hand. So just a nice little consistency boost in the late game. We're not going to be hurt by things like N as much. We also play Brooklet Hill in this deck, so that will allow us to search out not only our Zygardes, but this Octillery line as well. So like I said, we're playing it for a similar type of reasons that we play Octillery in Buzzwole decks. And then to round out the Pokemon line, guys, just 2 copies of Tapu Lele just to search supporters out of our deck. Of course, we can use Energy Drive as well, since this is a double colorless energy-based deck, but mainly just for Wonder Tag. So pretty streamlined Pokemon line, guys. Not too many bells and whistles, a couple of fun little techs, but overall, just going for pretty much straight consistency if possible. So going on to our supporter cards, we're playing, of course, for Professor Sycamore. Best draw supporter we have in the game, especially for basic heavy decks. You don't have things like rare candies that you have to worry about discarding, or evolution pieces most of the time. So Sycamore is going to be kind of our most preferable draw supporter. Also, we can throw away fighting energies to get back with our Zygardes as well. But we're still playing some other draw supporters. We're playing 2 copies of Cynthia and 2 copies of N, just as some, other shuffle draw options. Sometimes we might not want to discard our hand. Maybe it is one of those rare situations where we don't want to play Sycamore. Also in the late game, N is still really nice because we have Octillery, so we can potentially end both of us down to a low hand size, but because we play Octillery, we can draw out of it a little bit easier than our opponents. And then we also have 2 copies of Guzma as well. So just allow us to choose what we want to take knockouts on. And you guys actually might be thinking this is kind of a low count of Guzma, and you are actually correct about that. Most decks play 3 to 4, especially in some of like the Buzzwole variants. You typically see 4 Guzmas being played, and we're only playing 2. Like I said, it seems really weird, but the reason we're playing kind of a lower count of Guzma is because we're trying to actually play Bonnie. It's going to be a new supporter that we're getting out of Forbidden Light, specifically for Zygarde GX. So you get to discard a stadium card in play, and then if you've already used your GX move, you can use Zygarde GX's GX attack again. So this is actually pretty crazy because we essentially have 4 outs to being immune from our opponent's GXs and EXs, which is pretty crazy. So like I said, we're only playing 2 copies of Guzma just because most of the time we actually probably just rather play Bonnie and be immune to our opponent. So that's why we're playing kind of the lower count of Guzma. Also, it's really nice having Octillery because we have some other ways of supplementing our draw power. If we do want to play Bonnie for the turn, we still have other ways of drawing into cards that we might need. So Bonnie, really cool card. Like I said, it's specifically for Zygarde GX, and just being able to wall turn after turn, with this card and Zygarde GX is just a crazy effect. Once you start using it, it feels, pretty wild. It basically turns your Zygardes into a 200 HP version of the Hoopa from Shining Legends that can actually do significant amounts of damage. So really crazy card. 4 might seem like a lot. I think a lot of people might gravitate to playing only 1 or 2 because you might be thinking, I might only need to use this GX attack once or twice throughout the rest of the game. But, like I said, I'm going all in on 4. If we can use this 5 times, you really don't even need to Guzma a lot of the times if you can just be straight up immune from, damage and things like that. And also, probably at some point, you'll probably have to Ultra Ball away a Bonnie or Sycamore 1 at some point. So that's where also playing the 4 count and ensure that we have access to as many of these as possible. So going on to our trainer cards, the rest of them that aren't supporters, we're playing 4 Ultra Ball, just to, of course, search Pokemon out of the deck. We can also throw Fighting Energy in the discard pile to get back with our Zygarde GX as well. Also playing 4 copies of Max Elixir. So this is a card we've seen a lot in basic heavy decks. You get to look at the top 6 cards of your deck, attach a basic energy you find there to one of your benched basic Pokemon. So that's another way of getting our Zygardes up and running as quick as possible. Between DCE and 2 Max Elixir, sometimes you can even get the turn 1 GX move with Zygarde GX at some point. So it just kind of makes sense in these basic heavy decks. Also playing 3 copies of Choice Band just to, increase our damage output a little bit. Like I went over earlier, Choice Band is really integral to hitting for certain numbers in certain matchups, so just makes sense here. Also 3 copies of Floatstone to give our Pokemon free retreat. A lot of these Pokemon do have very awkward retreat costs. Regirock has 3, Diancie has 2, Buzzwole has 2, Octillery has 2, a Zygarde has 3. So we definitely need some ways at giving our board a little bit more mobility. That way, we don't have kind of suboptimal Pokemon stuck in the active spot. And then we're also playing 1 copy of Rescue Stretcher just as a little bit of recovery in this deck. Now we could play something like Super Rod here, but since our Zygardes can actually get energy out of the discard pile already, I feel like Rescue Stretcher might be just a little bit better here. I do think there is an argument for Super Rod though, just because I do like Super Rod in decks that play Max Elixir, just because especially in the late game, being able to Super Rod energies back into your deck will increase your odds of your Max Elixirs working properly. So, guys, feel free to play around with that. That's definitely a flexible spot, but like I said, since our Zygardes already get our energy back for us, I felt like Rescue Stretcher might just be a little nicer just because we have the option of getting a Pokemon just straight back to our hand. But like I said, feel free to play around with it. You might like Super Rod better. And then going on to our Stadium cards, since we do need Stadium cards in this deck to properly make use of Bonnie. And luckily there are a lot of Stadium cards that do have synergy with this deck. We have 3 copies of Brookwood Hill. This is kind of a staple in a lot of these fighting decks that we've seen. So once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a basic water or fighting Pokemon and put it on their bench. So that searches out everything in the deck outside of Tapu Lele, and you don't even want Tapu Lele going straight to your bench anyways, so this is really nice. It gives us some more outs to searching out our Pokemon, just allows us to get set up a little bit more consistently, and also, like I mentioned too, we need Stadiums to discard with Bonnie, so having some Brookwood Hills to toss away with this card in the mid to late game is definitely going to be nice. But we're still playing a few more Stadium cards. We're playing 2 copies of Scorched Earth. This is another card I really like in the list. So once during each player's turn, that player may discard a fire or fighting energy from their hand, and they get to draw 2 cards. So yeah, another card that is going to help out our consistency while also putting fighting energy in the discard pile for our Zygardes to get back. So really like these Stadium cards that we currently have in standard format. Both of these really have a lot of synergy with this deck, and I really like the way just the whole engine of this deck tends to function. And that's going to be it for the trainer cards, guys. Just rounding out the list, we have 4 copies of Double Colorless Energy, of course, to fulfill the attack cost of our Zygardes more easily. And then we're also playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 copies of Fighting Energy to round out the list. That way we have enough, that way we can hit our Max Elixirs pretty consistently. We also have enough to where maybe we can discard a few extras with Scorched Earth. Seems like just kind of like the right number. And you guys might be thinking, well, why don't you play Strong Energy? Strong Energy increases the damage output for your fighting Pokemon, so that seems pretty good in this deck, wouldn't it? And the reason we're not playing Fighting Energy, I mentioned this in our set review actually, and if you guys haven't seen that, definitely go check that out as well. But one reason I don't like Strong Energy in this list is because if you play Double Colorless Energy and Strong Energy, your Max Elixirs aren't going to work quite as consistently. So we would have to cut some basic fightings out of the deck to make room for Strong Energies, which in turn, like I said, makes your Max Elixirs less effective. Now, however, if you were thinking about cutting Max Elixir from the deck, I think that's something you could consider. But I like the high count of basic fightings just because we can use them with Scorched Earth and we can get them back with the Zygarde GX as well. So that is one reason we are not playing the Strong Energies. Definitely wanted to point that out. But guys, that's going to be the initial list that we're going to be trying out for Zygarde GX. Definitely one of the more hype new cards that came out of the set. You know, thanks to Bonnie, I really think this card actually has some potential. If Bonnie had not been printed, Zygarde would be pretty decent, but I just think Buzzwole would generally be better. So really curious to see how this archetype is going to fit in the metagame. And also guys, too, if you're interested in this archetype, over on our Patreon, patreon.com/rarecandytcg, our Stage 2 patrons actually will have access to an article that details some additional ways to build around Zygarde GX and some other techs and other deck building options that you could potentially include in this list. So definitely go check that out. I will have a link in the description below if you guys want to learn about how to access that too. But as usual, guys, feel free to like and subscribe, and definitely stay tuned to the channel. We're going to have a ton of Forbidden Light content coming up over the next several weeks. But if you guys can support us by becoming a patron, like I mentioned, over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or by picking up something from our online store, like this Lycanroc mat that you saw in this video over at rarecandytcg.com, that would also be greatly appreciated. But with that, I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you for the next one.